Today, Elon Musk is sending rockets into space. Jeff Bezos is confining the world's trade routes into boxes, and Warren Buffett shakes markets with a single utterance. But history's first billionaires existed long before them. Just think, Nebuchadnezzar, who adorned the hanging gardens of Babylon with gold; Tutankhamun, who buried his treasures for immortality; the Lydian king Crassus, whose wealth gave birth to the phrase "as rich as Crassus"; Crassus, the fire trader of Rome; the Medici family, who ruled Europe through banks; Rockefeller with oil, Carnegie with steel, and the Rothschilds with finance. They were all after the same thing: more. So, what is wealth? Is it land, gold, money, energy, information? Or is it simply power you hold over others? Think for a moment. If you owned all the grain stores while everyone else in your village was starving, would you be the most powerful person or the most hated one? Wealth began with the birth of the first civilizations. There was no gold yet, no currency, no banks, but there was land, and land meant food. When the first cities rose on the flat plains of Sumer, the definition of wealth was reduced to one thing: whoever collected the grain and distributed it held the power. The temples were not just places of worship, they were the first banks. Villagers brought their produce, the priests stored it, and then redistributed it. But naturally, the priests decided who got how much. This system gave birth to the first class in history, the elites, who controlled the economy. For the common people, wealth meant satisfying hunger, but for the priests, wealth meant controlling the stomachs of others. And here, for the first time, we face this question: is wealth what you possess, or is it holding control over what others desperately need? Think about Elon Musk controlling electric power, Jeff Bezos controlling trade routes, or Warren Buffett controlling investments today. They were no different from the Sumerian priests. Only technology replaced the grain. The granaries of that day became the server rooms of today. But the logic never changed. The rich bought not survival, but the ability to control the lives of others. Enrich a city so much that even its walls shimmer with gold. Do you think that city becomes eternal, or is wealth also the harbinger of its downfall? Babylon, in the heart of Mesopotamia, was known for its towering ziggurats and mysterious gardens. And the architect of this splendor was King Nebuchadnezzar II. During his reign, Babylon was not just a city, it was a spectacle. Its palaces were decorated with gold. The doors of the temples were sheeted with silver. The hanging gardens were so magnificent that they became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But Nebuchadnezzar's wealth was not solely architectural. The source of his fortune was war plunder and heavy taxes. From every land he conquered, he brought back gold, silver, and slaves. This wealth, flowing into Babylon, made the city look like a dream. Yet, who paid the price for this dream? The people were crushed by heavy taxes, and slaves perished beneath stone blocks. On one side stood Nebuchadnezzar's golden throne, and on the other, blood and tears. Today, Elon Musk dreams of building cities on Mars. Jeff Bezos wants to immortalize his name through space tourism. Nebuchadnezzar's dream was no different: to become immortal by building a city. But let us ask, does wealth truly grant immortality? Or, like the golden gates of Babylon, does it leave behind only ruins? If you knew you were going to die one day, to whom would you leave your fortune? To your children? To your people? Or would you take it with you into the grave? In ancient Egypt, the meaning of wealth was different. There, fortune was meant to control not just life, but death itself. Pharaohs considered themselves gods. Therefore, the treasures they possessed had to be with them not only in this world, but also after death. The tombs were essentially second palaces. The pyramids rose as the vaults of eternal life. When Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, archaeologists found gold-plated sarcophagi, jewelry-encrusted masks, and chambers filled with precious stones. Every single item represented what the pharaoh would need in the afterlife: golden chariots, thrones, weapons, and accessories. But there was an irony. Those treasures were not dazzling for the pharaoh, but for the people who opened the tomb thousands of years later. The wealth hoarded for immortality eventually turned into someone else's museum exhibit. Today, Jeff Bezos funds research to extend life expectancy. Elon Musk dreams of achieving permanence by moving humanity to Mars. The pharaoh's aim was the same, to purchase immortality. But the question remains, does wealth truly save you from death? Or will all your treasures eventually become artifacts displayed in a stranger's hands? Imagine holding a gold coin for the first time. What do you think determined its value? Was it the metal's shine? Or the simple fact that people believed in it? A king lived in the lands of Lydia in the 6th century BC, Crassus. We know him today as the source of the saying, as rich as Crassus. Crassus was history's first great currency billionaire. That's because, during his time, the first coins made from an alloy of gold and silver were minted. Wealth was no longer just land or grain. It had transformed into a small piece of metal you could carry in your pocket. The columns in Crassus's palace were plated with gold. Every room was filled with treasure. Even the gifts given to guests were equivalent to the annual income of others. He was so rich that his name became an idiom. But let's ask, how did Crassus accumulate this fortune? The gold mines of Lydia, the control of trade routes, and most importantly, systematizing currency for the very first time. From that day on, the definition of wealth changed. The most powerful person was no longer just the one with a full granary, but the one who minted the money. Today, Elon Musk invests in cryptocurrencies. Jeff Bezos controls digital commerce. What Crassus did was no different from what they are doing, redefining the economy. But Crassus's end leaves us with a lesson. When the Persian king Cyrus conquered Lydia, Crassus's wealth was plundered. The gold was gone, and the palace collapsed. Do you think wealth truly belongs to you? Or is it always just an illusion that someone more powerful can simply take away? Would you profit from another person's disaster? If the only person who could save your burning home stood before you but demanded all your property, would you surrender it? Marcus Licinius Crassus, who lived in Rome in the 1st century BC, was one of history's most cunning and pragmatic wealthy men. Rome was burning. Houses were engulfed in flames, and people cried out in despair. But Crassus's solution was simple. He would negotiate with the owner of the burning house. If the owner sold their home to Crassus for next to nothing, his private fire brigade would put out the blaze. But if they refused the deal, the house would burn to the ground. This is how Rome's richest man was born, turning disaster into opportunity. Crassus's fortune wasn't limited to real estate. He engaged in the slave trade, buying and training hundreds of thousands of slaves. He took a share of war spoils. He invested in enormous mines. While growing his fortune, he became one of the most feared and hated men in Rome. In the eyes of the public, he was the symbol of greed. But here's the irony of history. Crassus fell victim to his own ambition during the Parthian campaign. The journey he started with a massive fortune ended in defeat and shame. According to legend, after his enemies killed him, they poured molten gold into his mouth. The very thing he chased his entire life choked him in death. Think of the billionaires today who profit from crises. The investors who bailed out banks during the 2008 financial crisis. The tech giants who doubled their wealth during the pandemic. They're no different from Crassus. Do you call that opportunism or pure ingenuity? If you had to govern millions of people, would you spend your fortune on feeding their stomachs or on silencing their minds? Rome was not merely an empire, it was also history's greatest stage. And the sets for this stage were built by the emperor's wealth. Gladiatorial contests, massive arenas, free bread distributions, all of these were part of the concept of panem et circenses, or bread and circuses. Wealth was no longer just accumulation, it was the key to social control. Emperors invested their treasures not only in luxurious villas, but in spectacles designed to distract the public. As blood spilled in the Colosseum, the masses forgot their hunger. Animals sacrificed in the temples were distributed to please the gods, and every day thousands of people watched Rome's power, which was essentially an illusion built by the emperor's fortune. But there was an irony behind all this spectacle. Rome's coffers were filled with war spoils, yet they were constantly being depleted. As the palaces grew larger, the people grew poorer. Think of the media empires of today's billionaires. Are they buying truth or simply our attention? Netflix series, social media ads, massive concerts. They are all modern bread and circuses. Imagine. Once upon a time, wealth was measured not by the figures in bank accounts, but by the smell of spice along the caravan routes. Far from the glory of Rome, caravans advanced with the sound of bells across the Asian steppes, silk coming from China, spices from India, incense from Arabia, and wines from Anatolia. Every step was not just trade, but a chain linking civilizations together. The source of wealth was no longer the spoils of war, but the control of these routes. To capture a city was to seize not only its stone walls, but also the smell of its spice, the texture of its silk, and the shimmer of its gold. Persian kings collected taxes from the merchants traversing these roads. Byzantine emperors fought countless wars to control the Silk Road. And the Ottomans accumulated the wealth of 3 continents by keeping the trade routes in their grip. But these roads carried more than just fortune. They carried knowledge. Mathematics traveled from India to the Arabs and then to Europe. Gunpowder originated in China, only to one day explode within European castles. And the stories spread by the merchants ignited the imagination of civilizations. When we consider it today, aren't Amazon shipments, transoceanic container ships, and data moving across the internet the modern-day Silk Road? Wealth is still firmly in the hands of those who control the routes, not merely the goods. Imagine. In one era, gold held sway not in the coffers of kings, but in the vaults of bankers. In medieval Europe, while nobles ruled with their swords, the Medici family wrote the fate of kings with ink and ledgers. A bank rising from the narrow streets of Florence was more powerful than the palaces of Europe. The church declared usury as a sin, but the Medicis practiced sin like an art form. The numbers written in their credit books determined the rise or fall of an emperor. The gold required to elect the pope, it came from Medici vaults. When kings needed loans for their wars, the first door they knocked on was the Medici Bank. Every stone in Florence was paved with the bankers' money. But their wealth wasn't only gold. The Medicis bought art, Michelangelo's brush, Leonardo da Vinci's notebook, Brunelleschi's dome. All were etched into history with the money of a single banking family. Florence stopped being a city-state. It became a financial empire. Wealth was now hidden not just in trade routes, but in the abstract power of numbers. Think about this. The light of the empires on which the sun never set was actually burning in the dark tunnels of gold mines. When the New World was discovered in the 15th and 16th centuries, gold and silver began flowing like fire through the veins of Europe. Spain's ships carried tons of treasure from the American continent to its ports, and every arrival was celebrated with the ringing of bells in European palaces. But behind this wealth was blood. Gold ripped from the temples of the Aztecs, melted statues of the Inca emperors, tunnels where thousands of natives dug until they collapsed in the silver mines. Spanish kings instantly became the richest monarchs in the world. But the real question that needed to be asked was, did this gold belong to them or to the people who died for it? And this fortune didn't just nourish palaces in Europe, it funded wars. Kings used the gold to raise armies, cast cannons, and outfit ships. Once again, wealth became not just prosperity, but the fuel for imperial ambitions. However, history has shown us, the greed for gold dragged empires toward collapse as much as it raised them, like an obese body. Because if wealth is not governed by wisdom, it is more of a curse than a blessing. And that ancient question reappears for the audience. Is true wealth the fortune itself, or the wisdom to manage that fortune with intelligence? Think about this. The era when kings sat on golden thrones was over. Now, wealth belonged to the men who dirtied their hands and were shrouded in factory smoke. In the mid-19th century, the world began to change. Steam engines, railroads, coal mines. Industry was ushering in a new age of fortune. And the new rulers of this era were not monarchs, but industrialists. In America, there was one man, John D. Rockefeller. He reinvested the profit from every barrel of oil, buying out his rivals at every turn. Eventually, Standard Oil monopolized America's oil pipelines. Rockefeller amassed one of the greatest fortunes history had ever seen. But his wealth was more than just money. He controlled the future of energy and the modern world. Another name was rising alongside him: Andrew Carnegie. The son of a poor Scottish immigrant, he came to America and rose from telegraph operator to the head of a steel empire. His steel formed bridges, skyscrapers, and train tracks. Carnegie was forging not just iron, but the skeleton of the future. But behind this immense wealth were also tears. Workers toiled 14 hours a day in factories, and children were covered in coal dust beneath the smoke. The industrialists' fortunes were kneaded with the blood of the laborers. Yet, history is interesting. Carnegie donated the bulk of his fortune to libraries and universities at the end of his life. Rockefeller also spent millions on health research. They were among the first billionaires to declare that wealth is a responsibility. Imagine, money was no longer solely found in gold bars or steel factories. It had transformed into a power that entire nations held their breath for. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw a new class emerge onto the world stage: bankers and financiers. They had no factories, no laborers, and no smoky chimneys. Yet governments, kings, and even empires looked to their ledgers, their vaults, and their signatures for direction. The Rothschilds. In Europe, the Rothschilds were pumping money through the continent's veins. Was a war to be financed? Was a railroad to be built? They were the bankers before whom even monarchs waited. Their fortune was based on information more than gold vaults. Which army would win? Which nation couldn't pay its debts? Which king would fall? They knew before anyone else and acted first. The Rothschild family interconnected Europe with a web of money. A famous legend even claims they were the first to learn that Napoleon had lost at Waterloo, and they used that knowledge to overturn the English stock market in a single move. J.P. Morgan. Across the Atlantic, a man named J.P. Morgan was doing more than just banking. When Wall Street teetered on the brink of collapse in 1907, even the American government sought refuge in Morgan's parlor. Single-handedly, he and a few bankers rescued the stock markets, companies, and banks. He acted not like a state, but like an emperor. His power came not just from his money, but from his control over trust. America survived not thanks to the savior of the state, but thanks to the savior of the bankers. Think about it. Throughout history, kings, bankers, and emperors shaped the world with their fortunes. But who sits on the throne of the modern age today? Today's monarchs don't wear crowns. They don't have palaces, but they have spaceships. They don't have armies, but they reside inside the phones carried by billions of people. Elon Musk. He grew wealthy not in an iron mine, but in the fire of rockets. He turned an automobile brand into not just a vehicle, but a symbol of the future. Tesla, SpaceX. The world's richest man built his fortune not on land, but on dreams. But the question we must ask is a fortune built on dreams closer to collapse? Jeff Bezos. He started by selling books in a garage. Today, Amazon's warehouse is the heart of the modern world. No matter where you are globally, a box you order is a piece of his empire. Bezos's wealth grew through the silence of patience and algorithms. Yesterday's garage has become the market for the entire world today. Bill Gates. He began with code written in a dorm room. He transformed a software into the brain of billions of computers, Windows. His fortune was the key that unlocked the digital age. But Gates's real difference is not just accumulating money, it's his effort to use it to change the world. A foundation fighting disease, hunger, and inequality showed another face of wealth. Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook, which started in a university room, is today the memory of billions of people. Friendships, loves, conflicts, all pass through his network. Zuckerberg's wealth was born from the human desire to share private lives. But consider this question. If one man controls the thoughts of billions of people, is that merely wealth or a new type of power? Today's billionaires might be more dangerous than yesterday's kings. That's because they don't rule lands, they rule minds. Think about it. History's bankers finance states. Today's billionaires code the future. The fundamental question is, who is more powerful, an emperor or the man who runs the app in your pocket? Wealth. What was it truly? Once it was measured in gold, then in land, then in factories, and today, in code, algorithms, and data. History's first billionaires were those who owned the land. Because people worked the soil, grain grew and palaces rose upon it. Kings and feudal lords protected their wealth with the sword and with blood. Then came the age of trade. The bankers of Venice, the money changers of the Ottoman Empire, the merchants of London. Gold was no longer just buried, it was circulating. Money flowed through the world's veins like blood. Following that, the shuddering gears of the industrial age turned. The smell of oil, the soot of coal, the shadow of factories. Wealth rose from the machines. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford, they wove the future of the world with iron and steel. And today, a line of code, a single click, an app, can generate billions of dollars. Wealth now emerges from mines, not mines. The gold coin chests of the past have been replaced by the cold glow of data centers. But the real question is this: has wealth changed, or has it merely changed its disguise? Kings used to rule people with the sword. Could today's billionaires be ruling people with screens? Every ascent has a price, and in the shadow of every great fortune, a collapse is hidden. History reminds us not only of wealth, but also of the downfall of the wealthy. Marcus Crassus, Rome's richest man. He grew his fortune by putting out Rome's fires and buying up the land. But his greed drove him into one of history's worst wars. He was defeated in the Battle of Carrhae against the Parthians. Legend says they killed him by pouring molten gold down his throat, because the people said, "You sought gold, and by gold you died." John D. Rockefeller. He was the king of oil, but the public did not love him. His fortune was built upon the poverty of his workers. Even the American government was forced to break up Standard Oil. Rockefeller lived long, but he lived alone. He had the money, but in the eyes of society, he always remained the greedy king. Howard Hughes. He was a giant in aviation, film, and investments, but he drowned in his own wealth. As years passed, he succumbed to paranoia, confined himself to his room, and trusted no one. One of the world's most powerful men died in the prison of his own mind. In the modern world, today's billionaires live with the same risks. Bezos lost his marriage and had to share his fortune. Elon Musk's tumultuous life shows that wealth does not guarantee peace. Zuckerberg, despite his billions, remains a constantly suspect figure in the world's eyes. Even Bill Gates made headlines with his divorce. The price of money is not just the taxes paid. Sometimes it's losing your spouse. Sometimes it's losing your trust. And sometimes it's losing your sanity. Gold melts. Oil runs out. Code is forgotten. But greed, it never disappears. Crassus was buried with his gold. Rockefeller died a lonely man. Hughes lost his mind. And today's billionaires, while playing with power, lose their own lives. Wealth never lasts forever. One day, dirt covers the money. And all that remains is the question, what was wealth truly?